26th of August, 1943. Off the Palau Islands, Western Pacific. The fleet submarine USS Tunny descends through 300 feet of dark water, her hull groaning under pressure. 2 depth charges detonate close aboard the bow. Steel plates dish inward, instruments shatter, and the boat shudders from stem to stern. War Damage Report. Number 58 will later catalog the structural failures: buckled frames, flooded compartments, scattered equipment casualties throughout the pressure hull. By mid-war, United States submarines represent less than 2% of Navy personnel, yet they have already destroyed over half of all Japanese merchant tonnage sunk by Allied forces. Survival now depends on more than torpedo accuracy. It depends on how much noise a steel hull, its machinery, and its 70-man crew put into the water, including the clatter of pans in the galley, the cycling of a dishwater pump, the scrape of a metal ladle against a serving tray. This is the story of how systematic silence became a weapon. 7th of December, 1941 through 31st of December, 1942. Pearl Harbor Submarine Base, Fremantle, Australia, and the vast Pacific shipping lanes stretching between them. In the chart room at Pearl Harbor, officers lean over plotting tables covered in acetate sheets. Grease pencil marks trace Japanese convoy routes southward toward oil fields, northward with raw materials. Early patrol reports from Asiatic Fleet submarines and Pacific Fleet boats fill filing cabinets. Scattered merchant sinkings, frustrating torpedo failures, limited Japanese anti-submarine response. Not yet a systematic tonnage war. United States pre-war doctrine envisaged submarines mainly screening the battle fleet, attacking enemy capital ships in fleet actions. Reality by late 1942 shows something different. Merchant shipping emerges as the decisive target. Japan's dispersed island empire depends utterly on long, vulnerable sea routes for oil from the Netherlands East Indies, or from Southeast Asia, food from the home islands to forward garrisons. Every tanker sunk shortens the war. Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood assumes command of Submarine Force, Pacific Fleet, COMSUB-PAC, in early 1943, pressing for aggressive commerce raiding and systematic exploitation of patrol reports. Staff officers in COMSUB-PAC operations and intelligence sections collate data. Which routes carry the most tonnage? Where are escorts weakest? What speeds and depths offer the best attack geometry? The fleet-type submarine, Galley-class and Palau-class boats, displaces approximately 1,500 tons surfaced, 2,400 submerged. Diesel-electric drive, 4 main engines for surface propulsion and battery charging, electric motors for submerged operation. 10 torpedo tubes, 24 torpedoes carried. Fuel and provisions for 60 to 75 days on patrol. Crew, 6 officers, 64 enlisted men. Design range, 11,000 nautical miles surfaced. By war's end, United States submarines will have sunk approximately 5.3 million tons of Japanese shipping, over 1,300 merchant vessels, representing around 55 to 56% of total Japanese merchant losses. A post-war United States Naval Institute analysis describes the lost merchant fleet of Japan, noting that 54.6% of all Japanese merchant ships destroyed fell to American submarines, the single most decisive factor in the collapse of the Japanese economy. As submarine force results against shipping grow through 1942 and into 1943, Japan is compelled to strengthen anti-submarine warfare measures. More escorts, better training, improved detection equipment. This pushes United States submarines into a closer duel with sonar and hydrophones, where the physics of underwater sound becomes as important as torpedo marksmanship. By late 1943, a force comprising only a small fraction of United States naval personnel is sinking more Japanese tonnage than any other arm. Army Air Forces, Surface Navy, or mines combined. That success ensures Japanese escorts will invest every effort in learning to hear these boats coming. The next question is whether American submariners can learn to be quiet enough to survive. January through December 1943. South China Sea, Bungo Suido approaches to the Inland Sea and Tokyo Naval Staff offices. After the war, a United States analyst opens a translated Imperial Japanese Navy technical report on his desk in Washington. Diagrams of Type 93 hydrophone arrays and early echo ranging sets fitted to Kaiboken escort ships and converted trawlers. The document is dense with specifications, frequency response, bearing accuracy, recommended depth charge settings based on acoustic contact. Many early United States patrol reports describe Japanese depth charge barrages as poorly placed or shallow set. Some crews discount enemy sonar capability, assuming escorts are firing blind or relying on visual sightings. Reality proves more complex. Captured documents and United States technical mission to Japan reports reveal a systematic program, hydrophone and sonar deployment across escort vessels, improving depth charge doctrine, deeper settings in response to intelligence that American boats can safely exceed 300 feet. Imperial Japanese Navy technical bureaus standardized the Type 93 hydrophone and later echo ranging gear during 1943. Training programs expand. Escort commanders share lessons learned. The United States Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence and Post-War Naval Technical Mission to Japan reconstruct these enemy anti-submarine warfare capabilities from captured manuals and equipment. Passive sonar, hydrophones receiving sound without transmitting pings, converts underwater sound into electrical signals for analysis. Modern Navy educational material explains the principle. Mechanical vibrations in water strike a hydrophone element, producing voltage variations that trained operators can classify. Propeller beats, machinery hum, pumps cycling, hatches slamming, each produces a characteristic acoustic signature. Ship self-noise becomes critical. Propeller cavitation, bubbles collapsing behind spinning blades, radiates intense high-frequency sound. Machinery vibration travels through hull structure into the water. Structure-borne impacts from within the submarine, drop tools, slam doors, unsecured equipment shifting with depth changes, create transient spikes that stand out against background noise. United States doctrinal document, current doctrine, submarines, designated USF 25A, explicitly instructs that in areas with sound screens, boats should use silent running speed when close to listening escorts, linking own-ship noise directly to evasion probability. The manual does not specify every detail, but the principle is clear. If the enemy is listening, make yourself harder to hear. Japanese deployment of hydrophones and refined depth charge procedures reduces the margin for error. A noisy boat, or one that mishandles depth and speed, faces greater likelihood of being held by sonar contact and destroyed. By mid-1943, Bureau of Ships and ComSubPac planners recognized that the submarine's own mechanical and human noise will increasingly determine whether the enemy's passive sonar hears a target or hears only silence. The question is no longer just where to patrol or when to attack. It becomes, how quiet can a fleet submarine actually be? Mid-1943 through early 1944. Washington, District of Columbia, Bureau of Ships, and Pearl Harbor Submarine Base. Naval personnel unfold the Fleet-Type Submarine Manual to Chapter 13 on steering and diving control. A diagram shows 3 power paths feeding the hydraulic rudder actuator: normal power from ship's service generators, emergency power from the battery, and hand power from manual pumps operated by watchstanders in the control room. Pre-war practice assumed routine use of hydraulic and electric power for steering and diving even when close to the enemy. War experience and noise range tests conducted by Bureau of Ships show that electric motors and hydraulic pumps are among the dominant sources of machinery noise radiating from the pressure hull. Every pump stroke, every motor winding energized, sends vibrations through mounting brackets into frames and shell plating, then into the water. Bureau of Ships conducts trials and compiles War Damage Report Number 58, summarizing depth charge and mine damage across the submarine force. COM/SubPAC staff integrate these findings into standing orders and training syllabi. The manual language crystallizes. Hand power is used only when silent operation of the submarine is necessary to avoid detection by enemy craft, or when both the normal power and the emergency power have failed. Explanation of noise range trials. Controlled runs at different speeds and machinery configurations with hydrophones deployed at known distances to record radiated noise and determine detection ranges. A submarine running at 8 knots with ventilation blowers, trim pumps, and hydraulic steering all operating might be detected at several thousand yards in calm conditions. The same submarine at 4 knots, steering by hand power with blowers secured, shortens detection range dramatically, perhaps by half or more, depending on sea state and enemy equipment quality. War Damage Report Number 58 notes that the operating characteristics of the fleet-type submarine proved adequate for sustained depth charge attack, but emphasizes the importance of operating procedures, including quiet running for survival. Design alone is not enough. Correct handling matters. Once manuals codify the link between hand power and silent operation, commanding officers must extend quiet ship logic beyond the control room. The same doctrine that tells a helmsman when to shift to hand-controlled steering carries an unspoken implication. At the moment, silent running is ordered. Every other space where machinery or human activity generates noise must also change behavior or risk being heard. The manual paragraph is brief, technical, procedural. Its reach extends from control room hydraulics to auxiliary machinery spaces, torpedo rooms, engine rooms, and eventually, inevitably, to the galley and crew's mess, where metal pans clatter and dishwater pumps cycle, and 70 men expect 3 hot meals a day. November 1943 through November 1944. Submarine School, New London, Connecticut. Trainees in a sonar classroom put on headphones as an instructor cues sound recordings from the Submarine Sonar Operator's Manual. One track, the steady beat of a merchant ship's single screw, low frequency, rhythmic. Another, the higher-pitched whine of destroyer screws, faster, more aggressive. Another, background sea noise, wave action, distant biologics, thermal layer refractions. Many submariners initially regard sonar as a supplement to periscope and radar, useful for night surface attacks, less critical when visual observation is possible. The manual insists otherwise. When submerged, especially during evasion, listening is the main channel of information regarding the maneuvers of the enemy. Acoustic information becomes primary, not secondary. Technology and concepts. Hydrophones convert pressure waves into electrical signals fed to receiver amplifiers and displays. Low-frequency machinery noise, diesel engines, reduction gears, main motors, produces continuous tones. Higher frequency transients, slamming hatches, drop tools, pumps cycling on and off, produce short, sharp signatures easily. Distinguished against background noise. Definition of transient sounds becomes critical. A hatch dogged home with a wrench strike, a dropped wrench clanging on deck plating, a pump motor starting abruptly. These sudden noises may be identified at once as man-made, the manual notes, underlining that even a single impact can betray a submarine's presence and approximate bearing. Continuous sounds give range and course data over time. Transients give instantaneous bearing and immediate confirmation that a submarine is present. Training emphasizes classification, learning to distinguish friendly from enemy, warship from merchant, close from distant. As United States sonar operators are trained to classify and exploit transients, planners realize that Japanese listeners, given similar equipment, can do the same. Every internal impact or pump start in a United States submarine becomes a potential source of tactical information for the enemy. The logic is symmetrical. If American sonar operators can identify an enemy ship by the characteristic beat of its screws, Japanese hydrophone operators can identify an American submarine by the transient noise of unsecured equipment, slammed doors, or carelessly operated auxiliary machinery. The same acoustic principles apply in both directions. The training manual does not explicitly state, therefore, secure all loose items and avoid unnecessary noise. That implication is left for commanding officers and leading petty officers. But the foundation is laid. Sound is information, transients are dangerous, and every man aboard contributes to the submarine's acoustic signature, whether he realizes it or not. 26th of August, 1943, off the Palau Islands, Western Pacific. A clerk in Bureau of Ships, Washington, flips through War Damage Report number 58, months later to the section on USS Tunny, hull number SS-282. Diagrams show hull damage forward, dished-in plating, buckled frames, equipment casualties scattered throughout the boat. The narrative describes going to 300 feet, and rigged for depth charge and silent running under attack by Japanese escorts. Earlier patrols show more ad hoc responses under depth charge fire, with some auxiliaries left running, ventilation continuing, steering on hydraulic power. Tunny's report documents a coordinated response learned from doctrine and drills. Dive deep, set specific speeds, secure non-essential machinery, shift steering, and diving to hand power. Step-by-step breakdown of rig for depth charge and silent running on a 1943 to 1945 fleet submarine. Set depth and trim by hand and small pump increments, avoiding large ballast or trim pump operations that radiate noise. Shift steering and diving planes to hand power per fleet submarine manual. Secure ventilation blowers, non-essential electric motors, and as many pumps as operationally safe. Restrict movement between compartments. All watertight doors dogged and secured. Reduce speed to minimize propeller and flow noise. The attack, Tunny at 300 feet, when 2 depth charges detonate close aboard the bow. Heavy structural damage forward, considerable other damage throughout the boat, smashed instruments, broken piping, electrical casualties. Despite this, Tunny retains depth control through manual trim adjustments and ultimately escapes, evading further attacks by maintaining silent running discipline even while managing flooding and equipment failures. War Damage Report number 58 notes that despite structural damage that would have sunk earlier designs, Tunny's crew maintained trim and propulsion sufficient to withdraw from the engagement. The report presents this as evidence that fleet-type submarines, properly handled, can survive heavy depth charge attack. Proper handling includes depth choice, speed management, and machinery quieting, not design improvements alone. Tunny's case strengthens ComSubPAC's conviction that strict silent running procedures beyond simple depth and speed changes materially increase survival probability. After Palau, rig for silent running is no longer a vague phrase invoked in emergencies. It becomes a checklist that reaches from control room hydraulics to the last auxiliary pump, the nearest tool rack, and, though not yet explicitly stated in patrol reports, the galley and mess deck. The question implicit in Tunny's survival: if depth, speed, and machinery control can save a damaged boat, how far into the hull must that acoustic discipline extend? Early 1944. Pearl Harbor, submarine command offices and briefing rooms. Officers preparing for patrol open current doctrine, submarines, designated USF 25A, and review the section on evasion and sound screens. The document is a synthesis of war experience, lessons from patrol reports, intelligence on enemy capabilities, tactical recommendations refined through trial and error. Pre-Tunny doctrine emphasized maneuver and depth changes without fully integrating acoustic discipline into standard procedures. Revised doctrine links speed profiles, course changes, and silent running speeds directly to the known limits of enemy sonar capability. If Japanese hydrophones can detect machinery noise at 4,000 yards in calm water, then operating below that detection threshold becomes a tactical requirement, not a suggestion. COM/SUBPAC staff, training commands at Pearl Harbor and Fremantle, and patrol skippers who feed back after-action reports all contribute to the evolution of doctrine. What works? What fails? Which procedures correlate with successful evasions and which with depth charge attacks that hold contact for hours? The doctrine recommends speeds between 3 and 7 knots for evading sonar, noting that high continuous speed makes tracking easy for escorts equipped with even basic sonar. It warns against oil and air leaks that produce telltale bubble trails or surface slicks, treating these as both visual and acoustic hazards. It explicitly states, silent running should be employed during close-range evasion from surface craft equipped with listening devices. This is the transition from individual skipper practice, where one commanding officer might emphasize acoustic discipline while another relies on depth and maneuver alone, to a standardized, theater-wide system. Every boat operates from the same baseline. Every compartment has defined responsibilities when silent running is ordered. Training at Pearl Harbor and New London incorporates these procedures into qualification standards. The same document that specifies periscope exposure times, radar doctrine, and torpedo firing geometry also implicitly determines when auxiliary machinery will shut down, when ventilation will cease, when internal movement will be restricted, and when a galley will suspend operations and every cook will freeze at his station, ladle in hand, waiting for the all clear that means escorts have lost contact. United States submarine operations shift from art to science, from individual interpretation to collective system. The foundation is laid not just in machinery and torpedoes, but in procedure and discipline, including the unglamorous, unsung discipline of keeping quiet when the enemy is listening. By mid-1944, the question is no longer whether to employ silent running, but how effectively each compartment can execute it when seconds matter. Mid-1944 through mid-1945. Patrol areas in the South China Sea, Luzon Strait, and East China Sea. An oral history from a World War II submariner recalls that when rigged for silent running, air conditioning plants, ventilation blowers, and most fans were shut down. Compartment temperatures could rise toward 120 degrees Fahrenheit, especially in the Pacific tropics. Air becomes stagnant, thick, hard to breathe. Men sweat through their dungarees within minutes. Standard ration scales and mess deck routines assume 3 hot meals a day, cooked in a compact but busy galley. The fleet boat galley sits adjacent to the crew's mess near the center of the pressure hull, close to structural frames and deck plating. Metal worktops, stowage lockers, racks for pans and utensils, all bolted directly to the frames. When a pan is set down, the structure transmits that impact. When a ladle scrapes a serving tray, the frames carry that vibration. When the dishwater pump cycles, the mounting bolts feed that motor noise into the hull. Under silent running, heat builds, air becomes oppressive, and continuous cooking with frying, clattering pans, and running dish pumps becomes both physically untenable and acoustically dangerous. Cooks and mess specialists appear through memoir fragments and veterans' interviews, describing their tasks being halted mid-preparation when quiet was ordered. A pot of soup, left half stirred. A tray of sandwiches prepared in advance and served cold. Coffee brewed before the dive, rationed cup by cup while the boat evades escorts overhead. Refrigeration and fresh water pumps, During prolonged silent running, these are secured where operationally safe. Cooks rely on cold stores accessed before the quiet period begins and minimal water use afterward. Dishes pile up, unwashed. Meals shift from hot to cold, from cooked to pre-prepared. Later, sonar and submarine training anecdotes describe quick quiet. Upon command, talk stops, walking stops, tools are laid down, and even cooks, with mitten gloves and serving pans in hand, freeze until the listening period ends. To support silent running effectively, patrols adjust meal timing and menus based on anticipated anti-submarine warfare density. Hot meals when assessed risk is lower. Transit zones, open ocean. Cold sandwiches and pre-prepared items during choke point transits, approaches to enemy bases, or air search alerts. Galley practice becomes an element of acoustic discipline, not just nutrition and morale. By late 1944, the question for a patrol planner is not only where will escorts be, but also what will the galley be doing when they are listening. Late 1944. Washington, District of Columbia, Bureau of Ships Offices, and Pearl Harbor, ComSubPac Headquarters. Bureau of Ships analysts lay transparency overlays of noise range curves over charts of anti-submarine warfare choke points, comparing detection ranges at silent running speeds with those at higher speeds and with auxiliaries running. The physics is clear. Radiated noise increases nonlinearly with speed. Doubling speed more than doubles propeller cavitation and flow noise. Adding ventilation blowers, trim pumps, and hydraulic systems compounds the problem. Some officers still question whether shutting down small systems, like galley pumps or non-essential blowers, can meaningfully affect detection probability. The argument, machinery noise from main motors and reduction gears, dominates the acoustic signature. Auxiliary systems contribute only marginally. War damage data and noise range tests suggest otherwise. Cumulative noise reduction can shorten passive sonar detection ranges by critical margins, especially in marginal acoustic conditions. Thermal layers, moderate sea states, ambient biologics masking low-level signals. The mathematics. If detection range drops from 4,000 yards to 2,000 yards through machinery quieting, the area of vulnerability shrinks by a factor of 4. Patrol endurance in high-threat areas increases. Probability of successful evasion after attack improves. The cumulative effect across dozens of patrols and hundreds of depth charge engagements becomes measurable in boats and lives saved. Summary of lost statistics: 52 United States submarines lost during the Pacific War, with 3,506 officers and men. Killed, approximately 20% casualties, the highest rate of any major United States service branch. War damage studies correlate many losses with situations where the boat was detected acoustically or visually before attack could be pressed home. Boats that adhered to strict silent running and depth discipline showed statistically better survival rates under equivalent attack intensity. War Damage Report number 58 concludes that correct handling, including depth choice and machinery management, increased the chances of survival under depth charge and bomb attack. The report highlights procedure rather than design alone as the critical variable. A well-designed submarine handled carelessly dies. A well-designed submarine handled correctly survives to fight again. Once Bureau of Ships quantifies the benefits, even approximately given the complexity of acoustic propagation and the variability of combat conditions, ComSubPac has a stronger basis for making strict silent running and quiet ship discipline a non-negotiable expectation rather than a matter of individual command style. Training emphasizes procedure. Patrol orders specify acoustic discipline. Post-patrol debriefs examine compliance with quiet ship doctrine as rigorously as they examine torpedo firing solutions. The next step: seeing how this doctrine behaves in contact, on specific days in specific places where multiple boats record the same sequence. Contact, attack, silent running, and survival or loss. The Luzon Strait in late 1944 offers just such a proving ground. 26th of August, 1943. Off Togel Mlungui Pass, Palau Islands, Western Pacific. War Patrol reports from USS Tunny and War Damage Report number 58 are read together to reconstruct the timeline. Tunny attacks a Japanese convoy, fires torpedoes, scores hits. Escorts immediately respond, moving to counterattack. Tunny dives, increasing depth rapidly. Counterattack by escorts, sonar pinging, depth charges set for shallow detonation initially, then adjusted deeper as Tunny increases depth beyond 200 feet. Japanese escorts expect a submarine in shallow water, limited in depth capability, acoustically exposed through machinery noise and propeller cavitation. Intelligence suggests American fleet submarines can reach 300 feet, possibly deeper. Escorts adjust depth charge settings accordingly, pursuing contact aggressively. Tunny's crew apply recently emphasized doctrine on silent speed, manual control, and minimal internal noise. Speed reduced to bare steerage way, 3 to 4 knots, enough to maintain depth control without excessive propeller noise. Steering and diving shifted to hand power. Watchstanders in the control room operate manual pumps, reading depth gauges and bubble inclinometers, adjusting planes by hand wheel rather than hydraulic power. Ventilation blowers secured. Non-essential electric motors shut down. All hands restrict. Movement, speak in whispers, secure loose items. First close detonations. 2 depth charges explode near the bow. The pressure wave hammers the hull. Forward torpedo room reports structural damage, dished-in plating, buckled frames. Electrical casualties throughout the boat. Smashed light fixtures, broken instruments, minor flooding from ruptured piping. Despite this, Tunny maintains depth control through careful manual trim adjustments and limited pump use, timed to minimize acoustic signature. Depth settings of Japanese depth charges in the Palau area, inferred from damage patterns and post-war records, range from 100 to 350 feet. Tunny, at 300 feet, sits at the edge of effective depth charge range for many Japanese weapons in mid-1943. Combined with reduced acoustic signature from silent running, this makes sustained contact difficult for escorts. War Damage Report number 58 notes considerable other damage throughout the boat, yet records that Tunny retained trim and propulsion sufficient to withdraw from the engagement area. The submarine maintained depth control, navigated clear of the escort screen, and eventually surfaced beyond aircraft range to assess damage and make emergency repairs. Tunny's survival under heavy attack becomes concrete validation of depth keeping, speed management, and silent running as taught in doctrine and manuals. The same event also highlights a quieter layer of discipline. Every secured blower, every immobilized pan in the galley, every restricted movement in the crew's mess reduced the acoustic information available to Japanese listeners overhead. 1943 through 1944. Technical Analysis Rooms, Pearl Harbor and Washington. Engineers annotate fleet boat schematics, marking which systems must be secured in silent running and which must remain online even under attack. It is neither possible nor safe to shut everything down. Propulsion, essential hydraulics, and control instruments must remain functional. Depth must be maintained. Course must be steered. The boat must remain a controllable platform. Manuals show a structured compromise. Hand power for steering and planes where feasible. Reduce speeds to minimize propeller and flow noise. Minimal auxiliary operation consistent with safety and depth control. Steering and diving gear. Normal power from ship service. Emergency power from battery. Hand power from manual pumps. Under silent running, hand power is preferred despite the physical effort required from watchstanders. Hydraulic systems, trim systems, and drain systems each contributes to hull-borne vibration. Hydraulic pumps cycle to maintain pressure. Trim pumps adjust ballast to compensate for fuel consumption and trim changes. Drain pumps remove bilge water and condensation. Every pump stroke radiates sound. Under silent running, these are secured or operated minimally. Brief pump runs timed when tactical situation. Allows rather than continuous automatic operation. Ventilation and refrigeration. When these can be secured without immediate risk to crew or provisions, they are. Men tolerate heat and stale air for hours if necessary. Food in refrigerated spaces remains cold for limited periods without compressor operation. The calculus shifts from comfort and routine to survival and stealth. Doctrine warns to exercise extreme vigilance to guard against oil and air leaks, treating leaks as both visibility and noise hazards. Oil leaking from hydraulic systems or fuel tanks creates surface slicks visible to aircraft. Air leaking from ballast tanks or high-pressure systems creates bubble trails audible to hydrophones. Maintenance standards during silent running emphasize detecting and isolating leaks immediately. The mapping of noisy versus essential systems lays the foundation for later formal silent running and ultra-quiet bills in which every rating understands his acoustic impact and his responsibilities when quiet is ordered. Control room watchstanders know steering and diving procedures. Electricians know which motors to secure. Auxiliary men know which pumps can wait. Torpedo men know to avoid unnecessary movement in torpedo rooms, where racks and reload gear can clatter. With most major machinery solutions identified, hand power, reduced speed, secured auxiliaries, attention inevitably shifts to smaller irregular noises, tool racks, mess tables, galley equipment, the human element, footfalls, voices, dropped objects. Every source must be considered because anyone might be the transient that allows an escort to regain contact. 1944 through 1945. Fleet boat patrols in the Luzon Strait, South China Sea, and East China Sea. Fleet boat general arrangement plans show the galley and crew's mess at the center of the pressure hull, surrounded by crew berthing, control room, and auxiliary machinery spaces. Metal work surfaces, stowage lockers, racks for cookware and utensils, all mounted directly to structural frames. Efficient for feeding 70 men, also efficient for transmitting vibration. Official instructions rarely mention cooks by name, focusing instead on systems and stations, control room, engine rooms, torpedo rooms. In practice, silent running requires coordinated behavior in the galley. No drop pans, no unsecured crockery shifting with depth changes, no running pumps for dishwashing when escorts are listening, no chopping on metal cutting boards, no metal ladles scraped against metal serving trays. Structure-borne vibration propagates efficiently. An impact on a metal worktop, a knife striking a cutting board, a pan set down carelessly, a utensil drawer slammed shut, sends vibrations through mounting bolts into the frame, along the frame into the pressure hull shell plating, and from the shell plating into the water. Hydrophones can detect such structure-borne transients at considerable ranges, in quiet conditions, especially when continuous machinery noise is minimized through silent running. Intermittent transients can be more revealing than continuous machinery hum to a trained sonar operator. Continuous noise provides range and bearing, but blends into background after time. A sudden sharp transient, a drop pan, a slammed hatch, provides immediate bearing and confirms active human presence, not just drifting wreckage or a decoy. Later doctrinal references to quick quiet and ultra-quiet conditions emphasize that on ordering ultra-quiet, all non-essential activity stops, including movement and conversation in spaces like the galley. Later training notes stress that all unnecessary noise sources are to be secured when quiet is ordered, with examples listing air conditioning, laundry, galley equipment, and flushing systems. Though not captured under a formal wartime acronym, the effective result is a MAD minimize acoustic disturbance, galley protocol, synchronized routines pre-prepared food stored before diving. Strict discipline when sound conditions demand it. Cooks learn to time meal preparation around expected anti-submarine warfare activity. Hot meals cooked and served before entering high-threat areas. Cold, pre-prepared meals during transits through choke points. Silence during depth charge attacks, even if it means unfinished cooking and unwashed dishes for hours. By the end of the Pacific War, every successful evasion demonstrates a reality. The galley is no longer just a source of meals. It is part of the submarine's acoustic camouflage, as critical to survival as correct depth keeping or proper ballast trim. August through December 1945. Pearl Harbor and Washington, District of Columbia. Final wartime summaries are compiled as the Pacific War ends. Tables of patrols, sinkings, and losses circulate between the Navy Department and ComSubPac headquarters. The numbers tell a stark story. Japan entered the war with a merchant fleet sized to supply an expanding empire across the Western Pacific, Southeast Asia, and the Central Pacific. Pre-war merchant tonnage approximately 6 million gross tons. By 1945, United States submarines had sunk approximately 56% of Japan's total merchant marine losses, over 1,300 merchant ships, more than 5 million tons of shipping. This helped starve Japanese industry and forward forces of fuel, ammunition, raw materials, and food. Strategic impact. Without merchant shipping, Japan's island garrisons withered. Without oil from the Netherlands East Indies, the combined fleet remained in port. Without ore from Southeast Asia, steel production collapsed. Without food shipments, rationing intensified. The submarine campaign did not win the Pacific War alone, but it made victory inevitable by severing Japan's maritime lifeline. United States submarine losses: 52 boats and 3,506 officers and men. Approximately 20% casualties, the highest rate of any major United States service branch during World War II. Submarine duty was voluntary. Men who volunteered knew the risks. Those who survived carried the memory of boats and shipmates that did not return. Official United States Navy narratives stress that rapid and effective application of operational experience in fields such as torpedo reliability, radar tactics, and quiet ship doctrine was essential to this outcome. Torpedo improvements. The Mark 14 torpedo's magnetic exploder and depth-keeping problems were identified and corrected through persistent testing and feedback from patrol commanders. Radar improvements. Surface search and air search radars gave submarines tactical advantage in night surface attacks and timely warning of aircraft. Code breaking. Intelligence on convoy routes and schedules allowed submarines to intercept high-value targets. While torpedoes, radar, and code breaking enabled sinkings, adherence to silent running and quiet ship procedures, down to galleys and auxiliary spaces, often determined whether successful boats survived anti-submarine warfare, counterattack to report and repeat those successes. A submarine that sinks 10 ships but is then depth-charged and lost contributes 10 sinkings. A submarine that sinks 10 ships, evades depth-charge attack through disciplined quiet running, returns to port, and conducts 9 more patrols contributes far more to cumulative strategic effect. The technical and human lessons from these patrols do not end with the Japanese surrender on the 2nd of September, 1945. They are built into the next generation of submarines, into training standards, into operational doctrine that will guide the Cold War submarine force, 1946 through the 1960s, United States submarine bases, schools, and design bureaus. New manuals for post-war diesel-electric submarines and early nuclear submarines still reference silent running modes and emphasize hand power or low-noise operation when evasion is required. The technology changes. Nuclear reactors replace diesel engines. Advanced sonars replace simple hydrophones, but the fundamental principle remains. When silent operation is necessary to avoid detection by enemy craft, use the quietest means available. The introduction of nuclear propulsion and far more capable sonar systems might suggest that World War II-era noise discipline is obsolete. Nuclear submarines do not need to surface or snorkel to recharge batteries. They can remain submerged for months. Their speed and endurance exceed diesel-electric boats by orders of magnitude. Yet operational experience shows that even with modern technology, quick quiet and compartment-level acoustic discipline remain vital. Soviet submarines develop increasingly sensitive passive sonar. Detection ranges grow. The acoustic duel continues. Later, diesel-electric and nuclear submarines formalize. Silent running and ultra-quiet bills that codify wartime methods. Shutdown of all non-essential pumps and blowers, limitation of internal communication to whispers or sound-powered phones, suspension of maintenance and non-critical work. Compartment bills specify actions for control room, engine rooms, torpedo rooms, auxiliary spaces, and galleys. Every space has defined quiet ship responsibilities. Continued use of noise range trials becomes standard in submarine design and operations. Submarines undergo acoustic trials to measure radiated noise at various speeds and machinery configurations. Hull quieting measures, resilient mounts for machinery, sound isolation materials, precise propeller design to minimize cavitation become central to submarine development. The premium on controlling every noise source increases as sonar sensitivity improves. The Fleet Submarine Manual sentence remains conceptually unchanged in later guidance. Hand power or special modes are used when silent operation of the submarine is necessary to avoid detection by enemy craft. Technology advances. Tactics evolve. The physics of underwater sound propagation remains constant. The documented record shows that between 1943 and 1945, United States Pacific submarines turned noise control from an incidental concern into a central operational variable, integrating machinery, doctrine, and routine, from sonar stacks to control rooms to engine rooms to galleys. Their small force, using disciplined silence as much as torpedoes and radar, contributed decisively to the collapse of Japan's maritime lifeline. In the language of their own manuals, the requirement remained simple. Whenever silent operation is necessary to avoid detection by enemy craft, every system and every man, from the helmsman to the torpedo man to the electrician to the cook, must act as part of the submarine's acoustic defense. That principle, forged in the Pacific War, endures.